important people in the house. I prepared some talking notes, but I think I will be, because of time, I will be doing an injustice if I go through all my talking notes. And my talking notes will be very boring for you. You are entrepreneurs, you are very impatient people. You know, entrepreneurs, they are not they are very impatient people and they want things to happen now. But please bear with me. I was asked to talk, and my talk might be a bit uncomfortable. But I want us as young people to have a discussion of our situation and how do we get out of the situation. And whether are we taking the right path as young people in terms of being actively involved in the decisions that are taken, both by government and the private sector in South Africa. Whether those decisions are taking us in anywhere where we are dreaming of or where we want to be. It's a privilege for me to be here to join you young people. Yes, this is my school. I'm a student here now, trying to learn whether are we as government taking the right policy decision with regards to our energy direction. But I'm not here as a government representative today. I'm here as a postgraduate student at Wits University. Well, I know majority of us are very down because of the macroeconomic environment that we are living under. We just experienced COVID-19 that disrupted a lot of economic activities globally. Recently, the Ukraine and Russia, which saw prices of energy going very high. We saw prices of gas, oil, and how they are affecting our daily lives. Those of you who have businesses that uses those as inputs, they will understand what I'm talking about. And we're aware that out of all these uncertainties and the shocks that affects your business and how government does its things and how even our school, I know when we attend here sometimes the lights goes off and but I'm not there. I'm not I'm not talking about. But just after the Russia and Ukraine happened, a lot of countries had to think on how they reimagine their energy policies and how they are going about in terms of rethinking their energy security and which kind of energies do we need as different countries. And I think energy is very critical for running your businesses. You can't run your business with intermittent energies. Government cannot lead an economy that has got energy that is interrupted. So you need a stable, reliable, and robust energy mix as a country. And what is that? So that's what I want us to discuss. It's just that you don't have time, because I would love an engagement of how do we go about that. Because when I was given a talk here, I was told to speak on just energy transition. But I don't want to speak about just energy transition. I want us as young people to think on which just energy transition are we talking about. Because energy is very critical for an economy to boost productivity, for our competitiveness as a country, and of course to reduce poverty. When you look at the GDP per capita of the developed countries and their energy production, you will realize that there is a correlation between enough energy that you produce as a country and the GDP per capita of your country. And even there is improved social progress in countries with enough energy production and reliable energy production, because when you have stable energy, it means at least things will happen smoothly in that particular economy. And then we need to understand what kind of energy can do that for us, which energy carriers can give us that as South Africa. And of course, it's a very uncomfortable conversation, particularly now that there is pressure global to go green, and how that green is going to be constructed. I think it's very critical for us as South Africans. And I think you as entrepreneurs, you need to understand that my business now in 10 years' time, what kind of an economic setup is this business going to be operating in? I think that is going to be very critical for you. That's why you need to be very active in this just energy transition debates. Be active such that you protect the kind of decisions that are taken in your country, because they are going to affect your businesses as young people. Us as South Africa, we're faced with load shedding now. It has been interrupting a lot of industries. Those who are in the agricultural industry will tell you the industry, particularly that is dependent on irrigation. It's been serious disruptions there. They've been losing a lot of money. Because the PFAB reported that I think a third of agricultural production is dependent on irrigation. Now you can imagine how that is costing the South African economy, and agriculture is one of the high employing industries. I think they employ about 800,000 people. So you can imagine the interruption that the load shedding is causing to our economy. We just saw now rating agencies rating our country downward because of the interruptible energy that we have as a country. I can imagine for you as entrepreneurs, of course, when your country is downgraded, of course you lose hope, I assume. But I want you today to have a different mindset, to say, how do I participate? How do I engage properly in this energy discussion? And of course, we'll talk about opportunities that are there, both at the macro level and both at the micro level. What can you guys look at? I know sometimes energy space is a space of very capital-intensive industry, mostly by international companies who are coming with dollars. But of course, as local entrepreneurs, I think we need to drive a discussion and lobby even government to say, how can we be accommodated as local entrepreneurs in these big renewable energy projects, big gas projects, big nuclear projects, and big coal projects. So I think those are the discussions that you guys must talk about. Now, I want to talk about the energy mix, the just transition. In my view, and this is not a Department of Mineral Resources view, in my view, because I've been studying very closely the energy balances from different countries, both developed countries, the countries that have their own resources. When I'm saying their own resources, I mean those that are producing their own oil, those that have their own gas, those that have their own coal, how their economies are functioning, and whether South African government is taking a right decision to moving away from these particular resources. In my view, I think a very robust, optimal mix is very necessary for South African government. We need to consider the resources that we have, because when I look at the history and literature of different industrial revolutions, and I get to understand how many how these countries, if you look at the West, how they've developed, they've used these resources, coupled, of course, with cheap labor from slavery, but I don't want us to get there. Then the East, that use these same resources. If you check China, Indonesia, India, they are building new coal power stations. They are building nuclear power stations. They are building gas power stations. They are also robustly building renewable energy in massive quantities. And I want us to talk about that and to say to those who are saying, no, only go renewables, say, no, wait. Where are you taking your part from? Because I believe some of you maybe might be scholars. They know when you do a research paper, for instance, you start by reviewing the literature. Now, all go solar and wind. Where is that precedent coming from? Which country have run an economy with solar and wind? Because you get solar energy when there is sun. What do you do? You get wind when there is wind. When there is no wind, what do you do? But there is storage as well. But the storage capacity, you need quantities of storage to store that, and you need a lot of money, and South Africa doesn't have because it's got high debt to GDP. Then what do you do? Where do you go? Where are you going to get that money? Are you going to go and borrow from IMF again and say, I want to build large storages? And I don't think that is making sense for our country and the current economic dispensation. So what do you need? Of course, you need to do what they call opportunity cost, because they will talk about nuclear and say nuclear is too capital intensive. When you start the project, we need a lot of money. But nuclear gives you reduced zero emissions, doesn't have emissions. And it gives you what they call energy availability factor or what they call the capacity factor. Gives you about 80% of the energy produced from the system, while renewables, they give you plus or minus 20%. So you must think about the options that you have and which options are good for your country. And you must look around, check Europe. France is running its economy with nuclear. And everyone wants to go to Paris. Why? Because Paris is functional, isn't it? Now, you don't want to run your businesses with an intermittent, interruptible electricity. They can't function. Your businesses will collapse. Then there's gas. You know what the US did? US used to be importing a lot of energy. But when they discovered shale gas, they started to be exporters of energy, and they made a lot of money out of it. And one of the advantages of gas is that it reduces carbon emission, I think about 50% relative to coal. So when you are moving from high carbon emissions, of course, using gas will give you that reduction. And gas gives you what they call base load, what you get from coal. Because with coal power station, you can run what they call smelters. You know smelters, they run 24 hours. But a renewable, you can't run a smelter with renewable. It means you can't have an industrialized led economy with them. So, but of course you can use them in other areas. You can use them in your offices, you can use them in households. That's right, it's okay. And you can build them and they can supplement other sources that are reliable. Now, this discussion of us going renewable only is a lie, and we must not agree to it. It's not going to help us. And then I agree, coal is emitting. You know, when I was in Beijing, I know when you are there, you can see the smoke there. We were wearing a lot of masks, so you can see there is industrialization taking place here. That's why those guys, they took a decision to build cleaner energy sources. They are building a lot of nuclear power stations because they still want to be leaders in manufacturing. They still want to lead us in industrialization. And for you to do that, of course, you need that base load sort of an energy system. And they are, for quite some time, I think in the past 5 years, they've been leading in terms of solar panel, big projects, and some wind projects. But at the same time, they don't lose focus in building reliable power, which is what South Africa must do and must not make a mistake, because if it does make a mistake, our economic situation is going to be very bad. I think yesterday I was looking at the labor survey, and I saw that young people actually who are unemployed, about more than, I think, 52% or so. And it tells you about the dire situation of young people in South Africa, and women, particularly black women, are affected largely by that unemployment. So it tells you about our economic situation is in a very bad space. The economy has been growing, I think, around 1.6% average, and we haven't been reaching our targets from the NDP perspective. So where can we do it correct? We must fix the energy issues. Someone who's working in the mining space, we lost about 50 billion of revenues that can be generated in exporting some of the minerals, taking advantage of the commodity boom that was created by this impasse between Ukraine and Russia, and that was largely due to our bottlenecks with the Transnet freight rails, our railing system. And that is one of the challenges that I think we need to fix. They are talking about opportunities of bringing in private players. I think that's your space as entrepreneurs. Look at how you guys can play in that space. But it's one of the challenges that we have as a country, where we lost a lot of revenue. Although the mining did perform well in terms of its contribution to the GDP last year, but in terms of production, we contracted by 7.2% in 2022. But it's still a relatively biggest contributor to the GDP. I think about 8.8% to the GDP. It's a big industry. But you know, resources they get depleted. Now, how do we substitute these? For instance, we are moving away from coal. The revenues from coal. For instance, last year, 2022, mining contributed about 73.6 billion to the revenue of the country. Now, and a sizable chunk of that revenue was coming from coal exports. And now, if you move away from that, it means you will have imbalance in your books. And then there's a potential of gas and oil in South Africa. I'm not sure if you are aware of the discovery by Total and partners in the South Coast, the Block 11B and 12B. There's also gas discovery, helium and LNG in Free State, operated by Tetra 4 and Renegen company. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is presence of gas in South Africa, and that presence of gas presents opportunities for entrepreneurs like yourself, guys, to look into how do you guys participate in those economic activities, because it's a very big industry, very lucrative industry, which I think you as entrepreneurs, you can look at how do you participate from a local standpoint. There is a upstream development bill that government is doing, and part and parcel of that bill is looking at how local entrepreneurs can benefit, and that bill